In Frederick County, people know the names, but not always the stories. This is the last of the Good Ole Boys, hosted by Blaine Young and Billy Shreve. Each episode, we sit down with the movers and shakers of Frederick to talk about the moments, the risks, and the values that shaped who they are today. No sound bites, no spin, just real stories from the people who helped build Frederick County. This is the last of the Good Ole Boys.
This episode is a proud production of the Everything Frederick Live Podcast Network. Your home for Frederick's best podcasts, streaming daily on YouTube.
All right, welcome to the last of the Good Ole Boys. I'm your host, Blaine Young. Joined with me is Billy Shreve, back in the studio with his usual attire.
Yeah.
His podcast attire.
I just want to blend in.
And we got a lively show lined up for you today. What is the last of the Good Ole Boys? It is a show about Frederick, everything Frederick. You got to be connected some way to Frederick. Do we talk politics? Kind of, sort of, not really. We do talk to people running for office or holding office in terms of we talk to them about their story, who they are, what they want to do, all that good stuff. But more or less, what's their story? So let's go to a gentleman that's running for Congress in the, I guess we're 6th district, right? Is this so many districts now?
I'm sure he knows.
Chris Burnett, and we're going to get him in the studio. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah,
no
welcome
problem.
to the show.
And Chris, man, what a background. Look at what's behind you, Chris.
Are you in a library?
That mess is my wall of places I've been, things I've done. I've got to get that fixed. I know.
Wow. But you're running for Congress in the 6th district.
That's right.
Because Frederick County's broken up into 2 districts now, correct?
It is not. It was at one point, and it was proposed to be broken up again. But currently, Congressional District 6 is Northern Montgomery, all of Frederick, all of Washington, all of Allegheny, and all of Garrett.
Okay, because they keep fooling with it.
They do.
But this is the most conservative it's been since Bartlett. Is that correct?
Well, yes. I mean, essentially, when they gerrymandered him out, it went kind of to the left. And then there was some work that was done to refit it. So it's about a D+2, D+3 right now. So it's well within striking distance. And Neil Parrott had done a great job of making it competitive. I'm trying to pick up where he left off. He did a fantastic job over the last 6 years.
All right. Well, Chris, we want to find out about you. Tell the audience who Chris is.
Yeah. So I retired from the Marine Corps last year after 22 years on active duty as a lawyer. I had spent a majority of that time focused on international and operational law. But the interesting part about that, I never meant to make the Marine Corps a career. I happened to, I was going to law school and I went to OCS, Marine Corps Base Quantico, in 2001. So I was commissioned as a second lieutenant the summer of 2001. And I was in my second year of law school when September 11th occurred. Well, that changed the entire trajectory of my life. That reset all of my priorities, my sense of purpose and direction. Then over the course of the last nearly 24 years since I was commissioned, I had a chance to get married, start a family, deployed 5 times to the Middle East, spent about 6 years away from my family. And then when we landed in Maryland, we decided to make this our home. We wanted to raise our family here. And then when I got out, we made the decision that this was the right time to run as an opportunity to continue to serve in the greatest capacity that I could.
Wow. So when you served in the military, man, how many different places have you been?
Well, we lived at 7 different duty stations. Some of those were 3-year duty assignments. Some of those were times I was sent separate from my family for like a 1-year assignment for school. And then all of those deployments, some of those intermixed with moves with the family, other times not with the family. So 7 different duty stations and then 5 separate deployments to the Middle East.
Wow.
Where were you in the Middle East?
Every time I ended up back in Iraq. As much as I wanted to go anywhere else, I seem to always end up back there. 4 of those were on the ground. 3 were in Iraq proper in Anbar province. One, the most recent one, I split time between Kuwait and Baghdad. And then one of those deployment was on what's called a Marine Expeditionary Unit. You've probably heard about those in the news recently. That's where you've got we got two of those steaming to the Middle East right now, likely to have an amphibious assault capability available, or to seize one of those islands in the Strait of Hormuz to secure shipping lanes.
Wow. So where were you born? Where'd you go to school? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So I actually grew up in Western Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
My family had been in Pittsburgh since my grandfather arrived from Italy. And I had only decided to leave Pittsburgh after law school to go to the Marine Corps, which is ironic. Whenever I go out to Garrett and Allegheny and even Western Washington County, that's the Pittsburgh TV market. So when I go out there,
absolutely. Yeah.
It's like going home for me. It's all Steelers
country.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Pirates fans, WTB, what is it? WPXI, KDKA.
Yeah.
So, and we grew up in Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh, went to law school there. And then over the last, 25 years, I've been basically going wherever the Marine Corps told me to live.
Yeah.
So, again, you get out, you start, when you say you have a family, tell us about your family a little bit.
Yeah. So I met my wife during my first year of law school. She was an undergraduate. We managed to kind of continue to stay in touch while I was finishing up law school. And then even my early days in the Marine Corps, we got married whenever I was in Hawaii. And we've had 4 kids over the course of those nearly 20 years of marriage. She's originally from West Africa. She came here as a political asylee. In West Africa, whenever there's a change of power, oftentimes there can be some violence. So her family was forced to flee, and then she became a naturalized U.S. citizen over the course of our marriage.
Where's she from in West Africa?
Guinea, and she grew up near Conakry.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you familiar?
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I've been to Ghana, all over Ghana.
Yeah. So it's French speaking West Africa. So there's obviously there's very distinct cultural differences, but yeah, that's in the same area, certainly.
I'm glad Billy clarified that because I thought he had Ghana and I gave him penicillin. But tell us a little bit about it's a monumental task. First of all, I don't care if you're running for school board, county level, state level, you're running for Congress. What kind of pushed you over the edge and said, I'm running for office and I'm running for Congress?
Yeah. And that's a great question. Cause it was funny. This was not what I expected to do when I got out. It was the last thing my wife wanted me to do. Really, she wanted me to not be away, to work normal hours and actually, have a normal family. But, there was 2 things that kind of were the tipping point for her. One, she wanted to start a laundromat in Montgomery County. And to start a laundromat in Montgomery County, it was going to take over a year to get the licenses, permits, and all of the approvals that were necessary. It was going to cost us upwards of anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 in addition to just the costs of owning the business. And as a single income military family, we just couldn't do that. We were getting by. As expensive it is to live here, we couldn't take a year off and try to start a business. So that was whenever she had said, the fees, the taxes, and the process has gotten overwhelming. So then we looked at what was the best place where I could contribute immediately. And over the last 22 years on active duty, I spent a majority of my time working through or trying to, unpack federal law, whether it was deployed and looking at authorities and looking at budget, or when I worked at the Pentagon or my last assignment at Fort Meade, where I spent quite a bit of time, working with AI, quantum computing, and looking at some of our vulnerabilities with advanced manufacturing. It seemed to align that my experience and background was at the congressional level. It wasn't that I felt one was better than the other. It was where my background and experience could be the most relevant and make the biggest immediate impact.
So you have a tech background? Is it?
Not necessarily a tech background. So I had mostly approached AI and quantum computing from an international and operational law standpoint. So how do we integrate tech into our decision-making cycle? And then what were the consequences of using an AI tool when we were doing targeting? What would be the effect of quantum computing in terms of encryption as far as secure communications or financial transactions? So I had to learn tech to understand the law and then look at it operationally.
So where do you call home now?
Well, we now live in Gaithersburg, and this is where we're going to stay. I had been a resident of Pennsylvania throughout my time on active duty. I did not change my residency to Maryland until the absolute last minute to avoid state tax. So when you're on active duty, if you're an out-of-state resident and you're on orders, you don't pay state tax. Man, that was a wake-up call. The minute that I made my, I changed my residency to Maryland for good, I got hit with a heavy tax burden, and it was an eye-opener.
Then you had to register your cars, and that was even more eye-opening.
Exactly. I mean, the taxes and fees of living here are outrageous, and it really is just squeezing any working class family out of existence. There's really only two types of people that seem to live in this area, and that is either the extra wealthy and they don't mind the taxes and fees because it's just it's a rounding error, or I think Democrats in the supermajority have created a dependent state where everybody else is some way dependent on the state or federal subsidies to make ends meet, and that's no way to live.
I agree.
Well, you're going to get asked all the tough questions. I don't like doing that. I want people to get to know you first. And I'm sure that once you get to the point with debates and all that other good stuff, is there even anyone running against you in the primary? Do you have a primary?
Yeah, yes. So Robin Ficker has been in the race from the beginning. Robin Ficker, yes.
He lives there.
That's what I understand. Whenever he's been described as a perennial candidate, and I think that's probably the best way to describe him. I really like him personally. We've met each other because
I liked him better behind the opposing team of the Bullets back in the day when he was the heckler,
the professional heckler.
I've read it. I never saw him in that capacity. I could certainly see that aspect of him.
He was hired by Charles Barkley one time during the playoffs.
Yeah,
the heckle, but. Yeah, and so then, you're running against Robin Ficker. That's your primary opponent.
And then at the right at the last, Mariella Roca jumped in as well 1 or 2 days before the filing deadline. The big shakeup, of course, was that Neil Parrott did not file this year. And this is the first time he's not been running going all the way back to 2020.
Okay. And Neil's a good guy.
Yeah, he just got appointed to the Washington County commissioners. Or his name is in there. I don't think he's been appointed yet.
I think it's pending with Wes Moore right now. He's clearly the most qualified person. I think he's an outstanding candidate. He's been incredibly gracious with his time in helping me out. So I can't thank him enough for everything he's done and continues to do for my family.
All right. Yeah. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for joining us and giving us the opportunity to get to know you better. That's the purpose of this show. Like I tell people, we're not a political show. We do have people running for office or serving office, but we like to get to know them. We want people to get to know you, what you're about. And if you want to close a little bit, tell us anyone, what are you all about?
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about anything besides politics. I've been told that I need to be more like a regular person, less Marine-like. And that's hard after 22 years on active duty. I sort of think a certain way. So this is a great opportunity for me to talk about something other than being in a campaign and something other than the military.
What's your hobby?
My hobbies anymore are just trying to keep up with my kids.
There you go.
But over the years, I've managed to keep my Harley. Anytime I can get outside, whether it's hunting, fishing, or hiking, I'll take it. Those opportunities are less and less as the kids get a little older. But it's been living in Maryland, that part I've enjoyed. Having lived in California, lived in Florida and Hawaii, we've had some incredible opportunities to explore national parks, state parks, and live in all these different places. And when we decided on Maryland, that was one of the reasons. This is such a beautiful place. There's so many great things about the state. If it was just run better, it would be a much better experience for us all.
What's your favorite food?
I'd probably just have to go with spaghetti.
Okay. That's good.
True Italian.
Most people say steak.
No, it would be
good.
pasta.
Right.
Well, my kids laugh. If it doesn't have an expiration date or a wrapper, I don't want to eat it. And I don't know if that's a product of the Marine Corps or just bad habits.
Yeah. Before I let you go, what's your favorite childhood memory?
That's a good question. We went on a cross-country trip when I was 6 years old. And it seems like every time I have a funny childhood memory, it relates back to that 2-month-long trip across country in a station wagon between my dad losing his mind, my 2 older brothers acting like maniacs, or living out of a station wagon for 2 months. So I would say that hands down is my favorite childhood memory.
All right. Well, folks, we've been talking to Chris Burnett, who's running for Congress in District 6, Congressional District 6. And hopefully you had this opportunity to get Chris, to get to know Chris a little bit better. And then if you want to find out his political stances, I know that Danny had the website up there, and I'm sure there's a link or a inquiry that you can fill out and ask him anything that you would like to know more about his political stances. But I'm pretty sure a lot of your political stances are on your website.
Yeah, easy to find. I publish everything. So we put out over 200 videos. Just about everything I've talked about, we publish. So anything you want to know about me, it's somewhere out there on the internet.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey, I enjoyed it.
All right. Chris Burnett running for Congress.
Good luck to you.
Congressional District 6. And now we're going to go to the one and the only former president of Hood College, Mr. Ron Volpe.
There he is.
There he is. Ron, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to have you here, Billy. Thanks for having me here.
No problem.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for joining us. So we're going to talk a little bit about your life and where you came from before we get to Hood College. Of course, they had an incredible run with the men's basketball team, and you were right. They were playing in your building named after you. I went in there, and the building's named after you, Ron. They got a big picture up there and everything.
He has a presidential suite too. It's all catered and everything up there. It's nice.
Unreal.
Well, let's not go overboard now.
Well, tell us a little bit about Ron Volpe. Of course, folks, Ron was president of Hood College for what, 14 years?
Yes.
14 years. But let's go backwards, a little bit. Where were you born and raised? Where was Ron? Where did Ron grow up?
Well, I'm from a very small town in eastern Ohio called Martins Ferry, Ohio, not to be confused with Harper's Ferry. Martins Ferry, a little town across the river from Wheeling, West Virginia. Went to a small public high school back there and had an older sister. We were all Democrats back there, I might say, Blaine.
Okay.
We never met a Republican in that little town, all unionized, all steel workers, miners, coal miners. And I saw my first Republican when I went to Pennsylvania to college. So we were very, very Democratic back there. Met a lot of the old politicians back there in eastern Ohio.
Well, I bet you saw a lot of Republicans on the board of trustee of Hood.
Well, yeah, there were a few. There were a few. They're good people, though,
So we have to tie this into basketball. So did you play basketball in high school?
I did, Billy. I'm not sure how I got connected to basketball. We were from a poor community. The entire community was poor. We didn't have much money.
How poor, Ron?
Well, my dad worked 3 jobs.
Okay.
And he worked in the mill from some 7 till about 3 in the afternoon.
Steel mill,
Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel Company. It was Wheeling Steel at the time. And then after that, he went down to the corner and he worked in a produce market selling fruits and vegetables. He was good at that because as a boy, he was out on the West Coast picking fruits and vegetables. He was in the fields. Okay. So he worked for a while there from 3 to about 6, and he didn't get paid. And then on Friday, at the end of the week there, the owner gave him a brown basket to fill up with fruits and vegetables. That's the way they paid him.
Wow.
And then on Saturday, we didn't own a car, but on Saturday, he went down to the Pennzoil station and changed tires, fixed flats, washed cars for 25 cents a piece. And I asked him one day, Dad, I never get to see you anymore. You're always working. You have 3 jobs. Why do you have 3 jobs? And he looked at me without breaking a grin at all. He said, because I can't get 4. So he worked hard. He was a hard worker. He was a great guy. And obviously he was my role model and thought so very much of him. But at any rate, to answer your question, Billy, we played ball back there, football, basketball, and baseball. That's all the only sports we had back there because it was inexpensive. You didn't need to buy any fancy golf clubs. We didn't buy hockey sticks and things like that. So we played, and I was pretty good at basketball. And I don't know how or why, but there was some DNA in me. I had an uncle that was very good in basketball. He played at Ohio State. Then he played in the Continental Basketball League. And his brother was a great basketball coach in Columbus, Ohio, and was in the Hall of Fame. So I guess it rubbed over to me. And yes, I played for 4 years in high school, a very, very good basketball school, by the way. And I was fortunate to receive an athletic scholarship to an all-men's college in Erie, Pennsylvania called Gannon College.
But before that, didn't you try out or get an audition at Ohio State I mean, you were on the court with the Ohio State coaches.
Well, yeah, that story got out.
Is it true?
Well,
It is.
yeah, my uncle knew Fred Taylor, who was the then coach at Ohio State. In fact, they played on the same Ohio State team. And the hero back in my area and back in those years was a guy named John Havlicek. Now, the older viewers and listeners will remember Hondo Havlicek at Ohio State, then a tremendous player, Hall of Famer at the Boston Celtics. And we all wanted to be like Hondo. And he went to Ohio State, and I said, I can go there. And, of course, my dad said, you're really good, son. You can play anywhere you want. So I got my uncle to get me a tryout at Ohio State. Fred Taylor, all those great players there. Jerry Lucas is on the floor. Hondo's out there. So I was out there with him, and I was firing it up. I was shooting up pretty good. Now, I was a skinny little kid then, and when it was all over, the coach took me to the side and said, Ron, you have a pretty good shot there, but I'm going to tell you something. I can get a guy 6'3", 190 to do everything you can do. I suggest you look at a Division II school. You're not going to play D1, son. Okay. And that was that.
And you got a scholarship.
And I got a scholarship at a Division II school.
So you still didn't answer how poor you were. I mean, your dad worked 3 jobs. You couldn't have been that poor. I mean, did you wear a feed bag as a shirt? Or, I mean, how bad would somebody kick a can? Did they say, hey, you moving? I mean, how bad was it?
Well, we weren't in poverty, but that whole community relied on the mill.
Okay.
It was all centered around one.
It was. Everyone worked there. And
were you happy?
Oh, we were very happy.
Oh, that's all matters. Money's not everything, Ron.
Great family. And
we will get to your Hood College president salary when we're done, but money's not everything.
But you see, all that early days of my life taught me an awful lot. It transferred all the way through to my days at Hood College, and hard work pays off. Hard work pays off.
Yeah. So then you leave college, and what happens?
Well,
that was the first college.
Yeah, that was the first college. I had 4 wonderful years at Gannon, took a degree in business, and then I worked as a newspaper reporter for the the Erie Times, I should say. And I enjoyed that very much. And then my dean took an interest in me, sent me down to Cincinnati to Xavier University, another good basketball school. And I did my MBA at Xavier, and I was finishing up there, and I was preparing to go on with Procter & Gamble. They're right there around the doorstep of Xavier University. So I did a lot of work in product development, market research, statistics, and so on. So I was preparing for a career with Procter & Gamble, and my roommate used to say, Ron's going to make his fortune selling soap.
Wow.
So
you didn't say baby oil.
No. So I was preparing for that Procter & Gamble career, and my dean from Gannon called me and said, Ron, I know you're finishing up your MBA. We have a spot for you here back at college. Would you like to come back and teach? And I said, oh, no, I've died and gone to heaven here. I'm going to get a great job with P&G, $10,000 a year. I'm single. I'll have a new Camaro. I get to see the Cincinnati Reds play every day in Old Crosley Field. He said, well, look, why don't you come up to Erie anyway and just meet with some of your old faculty? So I did. We talked about it. It was so fun being back at my alma mater after 2 years. And I signed a contract and came back to Cincinnati. And I showed my roommate that I signed a contract to go to Gannon. And he said, for how much? And I said, $6,200 a year. He says, don't tell the dean at Xavier, they'll take your MBA away. So that's how I really started in education. I went back to Gannon then, and I taught there for a number of years. And I enjoyed it very much.
Well, you got your PhD there.
Well, no, I got my PhD some years later at the University of Pittsburgh. I left Gannon once, and then I had a wife with me at that time, and we spent a couple of years at Pitt, and then returned back to Gannon and became the dean of the business school.
And that's when you became a Steelers fan.
Oh, no.
And a Penn State fan.
No. I've been a Browns fan since the days of radio. Wow. we listen to the Browns.
It's been a rough life
all the time. We even listened to Ohio State on the radio before the days of television and so on. Of course, we couldn't afford a television.
So I guess you love Jim Brown.
Well, Jim Brown was my idol, still is. I went to see not only all his games, but I went to see all the movies that he made.
Do you know the association with the Browns, the Frederick?
Jim Brown?
No, the Cleveland Browns.
I really don't.
So you know the Weinberg family?
I do.
Do you remember Rand Weinberg and Dave Weinberg?
Yes.
Dave's uncle, Dan Sherby, owned part of the Cleveland Browns, and David used to go there as a kid when Jim Brown played there.
I never knew that.
Or I think the other owner was a cab owner. I think his name was Artie. I have to look it up. I don't want to mispronounce.
I didn't know that.
Yep. And what's the significance of the Cleveland Browns?
Well,
They're the only team. What?
They're the only team
Named after a person.
Oh, very good. Paul Brown.
That's right.
Well, I was
Wow. A
well
lot of trivia here.
There's another bit of
Gotta
trivia.
know your stuff.
Well, there's another trivia here. Blaine,
Yeah?
That when I was in Cincinnati finishing up at Xavier, after watching the Reds, I was there in the fall and I watched the first AFL team that Ohio had. That was the Cincinnati Bengals. And you know who their coach was?
No.
Paul Brown.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Paul,
Really?
Of the Cleveland Browns.
Did
Paul
not know
Brown
that.
was. So I watched the Cleveland Bengals then. See,
I remember the Icky Shuffle.
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Boomer size.
Shuffle.
That's right.
So, but so then where
So
where
you were
we
a Steelers fan, so we'll pick up from there.
yeah, where are we at now, Ron?
Well,
in your
when I-
journey, your life
well,
journey.
when
This is the story of Ron Volpe's
Well,
life.
I don't know if it's a good story.
And
but
by the way, you said you had a wife. Then you got a wife now too, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah, it's the same one.
Well, I'm just saying. That's kind of the way you said. Well, I had a wife along with you.
No, it's,
So you picked up a wife in Pittsburgh.
she's great.
Is she a Steelers fan?
she's
Oh.
she's not into sports.
Penn
She's
State?
great.
Penn
She's
State
great.
football?
No.
Oh, God.
I met her in Erie. She was a chemotherapy nurse, just terrific, great person. And we were married in Erie, and I had an opportunity to go to the University of Pittsburgh as a research associate and continue working on my doctorate. So when I proposed and Lynn said yes, I says, I'm all set for us to go on our honeymoon. And she says, where are we going? And I says, well, I propose we go to Oakland. And she says, why Oakland, California? There's a lot of places out there, but why Oakland? I said, I wasn't talking about California. Oakland is where the University of Pittsburgh is located, and I'd like to finish my PhD if I were down there. So Lynn said, okay. She went with me, and as I did my research and gathered data and so on and wrote my dissertation, she helped me very, very much as a researcher. She was great. As a matter of fact, when I finished my PhD, I awarded her a diploma that said,
Wow.
Lynn, here's your own PhD.
Wow.
Putting hubby through doctorate.
So gracious.
So she was
So
great.
gracious.
So that kept me at Gannon for quite a while. And oddly enough, we had enrollment problems, financial problems at Gannon, a small liberal arts college in a very historic city, church related, single sex. Does that all sound familiar?
How many students?
We had about 1,000 students back then.
So very familiar.
So we were letting faculty go. We had different issues, and I was called in one day by the president, and he called faculty in on Friday afternoon to tell them they didn't have a job next year because we were losing students and so on. At the time, I was still single. I wasn't worried about losing my job. If I did, I had an MBA, I had a new car, I had a few bucks, and I had a stereo. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And so I was ready to leave, but he didn't want me to leave. He wanted me to become the dean of admissions.
Really?
I said, Monsignor, I don't know anything about admissions. I don't know the difference between an ACT and an SAT.
Could you spell Dean?
And he said, well, the fact that you know both of them is good enough for us. Yeah. You're out here doing consulting for these businesses. We know you're out there. We heard what you're doing. And you know all this marketing and research and demographics. And that's what higher education is all about. Now, this is back in the 70s. This is a little Roman Catholic priest talking marketing and demographics. College presidents didn't do that. But this guy was sharp. So I agreed to become the dean. And we recruited students, and we went co-ed, and we brought women into my alma mater, and that was a hard sell, but it worked out well. And then I went to Pittsburgh, and then went back to.
Took your wife with same wife,
absolutely.
Okay.
I wouldn't go anywhere else.
I'm just checking. You know.
I wouldn't go anywhere without her. Either. So then I had a great career at my alma mater, loved it very much, and an opportunity cropped up for me to return to Ohio. At the largest and oldest Lutheran university in North America called Capital University. Mm-hmm. So I went there as the graduate school dean, then later as the vice president and dean of the faculty, then the provost, then the president. So I had 13 wonderful years at Capital University, and we loved Columbus very much. And I was set. I was prepared now after 35 years in higher education, mostly in senior administrative positions, to return to the classroom, become a faculty member. And then the folks from Hood came calling, and their consultants stopped by the office, and they talked to me about Hood College. And I said to them, I've never heard of Hood College.
So did they put?
How did they find you?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, when these consultants, they're sharp. They just search all the schools, and they had a profile of what the next president of Hood should look like. Someone who has experience in admissions and business, is committed to the liberal arts, is old enough to get the job done, but young enough to still have some energy and so on. And I used that consulting firm to help me at Capitol, a law school dean some years ago. So they sort of knew me then. And they came in and talked about Hood. And I said, I'm sorry, I've never heard of Hood. And then they said,
I've never heard of Capitol.
Well, yeah, sure. It's the oldest and largest Lutheran university.
I mean, I'm just saying fair game.
Absolutely. That's right. So then they talked about Maryland. And I said, well, I've never been to Maryland. And they looked at me like, what do you mean you've never been to Maryland? I said, well, I've been to Washington, D.C. a lot, and I do know something about Maryland. And they says, what? And so I know the former governor was Spiro Agnew, and he got in trouble. And they said, that's all you know? Yeah. I said, no, I knew of Lefty Driesell, really liked Lefty Driesell. Really
UCLA of the East.
Yeah, well, there you go. But he never quite made it. And so we chatted about things, and I told them thanks, but no thanks. And then these guys were sharp. They start talking about Hood College and Frederick, Maryland, in light of Gannon College in Erie, Pennsylvania. And Gannon and Hood were very similar kinds of institutions, small, needing students, small endowments, church-related, liberal arts in a historic city. And they said if I came to Hood, it would be like going back home.
Yeah.
Well, I laughed, and then I had the typical airport interview, and then they
so did you fly down here?
I flew down. Yes. First there was the telephone interview, which then we talked. Then you flew to the airport and interviewed with about 15 or 20 other semifinalists with the search committee. And then they called a while later and said, you're one of the finalists. We'd like to bring you back. And at the time, the search committee chair was Faye Cannon of Bank, F&M. And they interviewed me at F&M Bank conference room there. So we had a good conversation, and one thing led to another. And on a Sunday, the board chair called and offered me the job. And we talked for about an hour, and I says, well, this is interesting. My wife was there, and she was very supportive, and we liked what we saw in Frederick. And so,
did they tell you how bad it was?
Well, they gave me a report that was published by a consultant throughout the college community. It was pretty bad.
It was bad. It was a lot worse than people
don't
realize.
Remember how bad it was.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I don't think they told anybody.
Well, it was. It's unfortunate. There were a lot of good people there, and then a lot of good presidents prior to my arrival. All these people wanted to do the right thing. It was very difficult. Tough decisions had to be made. There was like $70 million of deferred maintenance, budgets that weren't being balanced, dipping into the endowment, governance issues. So there are a lot of issues there, and I thought, hey, at my age and what I've seen over 35 years in higher education, I think I could come in here and make a difference. And we had great faculty all the time. And so when I arrived,
we'll go back to, so you took over from Martha Church, I'm assuming.
Well, no? Martha left, and after Martha came Shirley Peterson.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Shirley was here for about 4 or 5 years, and she worked very hard and tirelessly. I met her, talked with her, and she had a rough time at Hood. I'll say a rough time. And she left after 4 or 5 years, and then they did a search, and they brought a 1-year person in to be the acting president, Bob Funk. Bob Funk was a good fellow. And then I came in. So really, I was the 4th Hood president in about 6 or 7 years. That in itself tells you something about the environment there. But right away, I connected with a lot of good people in Frederick. We had some great Frederick icons on the board, people like Al Shockley and Charlie Nicodemus and Ray Ramsberg. Then later on, Phil Berkheimer. We had Rick Adams. We had Faye Cannon and a whole host of other good Frederick people that wanted to see this place succeed. So I had a lot of support from them. And then I went around the county and the state and down to Annapolis and met with people down there like Paul Sarbanes and the 2 Mikes. I called them the
Mike
2
and
Mikes, Mike and Mike, and I befriended them. And,
Mike Bush, Mike Miller.
There you go. And they never turned me away. And so I just, Maryland's a small state, but it was a friendly state, an engaging state. And they gave me a platform to tell the Hood story. Yeah. And it's a great story. And so we needed a few years to turn the mission around a little bit, bring in the men. It was difficult at first, but we got the job done, and then it generated more students, more enrollment, more revenue.
You took over, took it co-ed.
Well, that was it. That was the centerpiece. And then we added some facilities on campus. The campus had a lot of deferred maintenance. We added some new academic programs. And we did two things. We used both academics and athletics to enhance the college because they both attract students. And I was very proud when we put in the nursing program. It was needed in this community.
Absolutely.
We had the science center, we had the faculty. And so we put that nursing program in, and it still to this day is the largest and most successful program in Hood in terms of numbers of students.
Wow.
Not too long after that, though people know I'm a basketball guy, we put in a baseball team. Yeah. Not because I'm real crazy about baseball, although I like baseball.
Well, go back. How hard was it to tell the board? How hard, because people get set in their ways.
Yeah.
How hard was it to tell the faculty, to tell the student body, we're going co-ed? Was an all-girls school.
Sure.
That was, the history of it. A lot of folks from New Jersey, New York sent their kids to Hood. It was nationally recognized as an incredible school.
Yeah, and he skipped over another part, too, we'll get to.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to be very honest, presidents don't tell the board they're going to change the mission of the enterprise. You can suggest, recommend, urge, in some cases beg and plead. But I used my background in marketing research, statistics, demographics, and I came in with charts. And these figures, they don't lie. I came in and told them that there just aren't enough of young high school women wanting to go to women's colleges anymore. In fact, I showed them a pie chart. And I said, now, if we stay at women's college for next year, this is what will happen. 50% of this pie chart are comprised of men, so you exclude them. The other 50% of that pie chart, about 49% are women who do not want to go to a women's college. So when I showed them that the pool of prospective women for a women's college is very, very small, it was really hard hitting. And I said, I don't think we could make it. I don't believe we could make it. And so when we showed them that, the data showed them, the data told the story.
Yeah. And then
What are you saying I missed? What I missed?
Well, I don't know if you missed anything, but Ron, there was another component to that. You had told me one time that, a lot of colleges, they have to have a big endowment so they can, tap into that for different things. So what was the story with the endowment?
Well, at one time in the 90s during Martha Church era, we had about $90 million endowment, which was handsome for a school that size. But over the years, the college was dipping into the endowment for operating purposes. No one did anything wrong or fraud or illegal or dishonest. They needed the money to operate the college, and our endowment was reduced rather dramatically.
What's dramatically?
Well, it was down to the teens. So it went from 90 million to down 17, 18, 19 million. And when I arrived, we were still taking money out because we had bills and debt we had to pay. It took us a couple of years to turn that around. Well, as we were looking at co-ed, I was traveling around the country to institutions that had gone Hood's route, started as a women's college and then went co-ed. So I was chatting to one president. In fact, he was up in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I was at Mercyhurst College. They went from a women's college to a co-ed school. So I was talking to that president who I knew pretty well. And he says, well, how much new money are you going to have to invest in this co-education turnaround? And I says, what do you need? What do you mean new money? And he says, well, you're going to have your operating budget, and then you're going to need X millions more of new money to turn this thing around. I says, well, Bill, not only don't I have any new money, I don't have enough of old money.
Right.
We're going into the endowment so it was very difficult from a financial point of view, but we had to pull out all the stops. And for those first couple of years, those first 2 years of turnaround were very difficult. Some trustees left the board, some faculty left. But we put the plan in place. As they say, you plan the work and work the plan.
Yeah, but you had to yourself. You jumped on some planes. You traveled a few miles during.
You had to go get those Hood donors.
Oh yeah,
those Hood alumni that had some money.
Well, my very first year, I probably traveled somewhere out of town every weekend. Now, most presidents like to stay on campus in the weekends because there's a lot of activities.
Yeah.
But with Hood, we only had 300 girls living on that entire campus, and half of them would go home on the weekends. Mm-hmm. So we had nothing going on the weekend. That was the bad news. The good news, it enabled me to fly out somewhere. I started on the weekend after 9/11. I was inaugurated right around that period, and I went to fly out.
There's more.
I went to fly out that weekend, but we couldn't. So I drove all the way to Long Island, New York. That was my first alumni visit after I was inaugurated, and we drove all out. That's a Long Island out there, you know.
Yeah.
They don't call it long for nothing, but we talked to a few alums out there, and then every weekend it was somewhere else, East
You
Coast,
were
West
flying.
Coast. We would fly. We went out to California, from California to Maine, and every place in between. I had a map in the office of all the states and kept putting stick pins in the states, in the cities.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience for me, and it was a life-changing
Well,
experience, actually.
But what people don't realize is, Ron, you get motion sickness.
How did you know
Is that true, Ron?
Well, I do.
So what would happen when you got off the plane?
Well, I flew off with my vice president of institutional advancement, and she was very good and very accommodating, and she knew that I had trouble traveling. When we would fly places, we always flew coach. We had to save money. So it was in those days you would go to the airport 2 hours in advance and stand in line to get on Southwest so you can get an aisle seat. So that was me. So I would get on first, then she was sitting next, and we'd read books, listen to music, do whatever, and sometimes hold my hand, but I'm not a good traveler. And then when we arrived in the city and we would rent a car to go to where we're going, I would have to drive because I'm not real good with directions. I'm challenged.
Yeah. You'd have to sit there for a little while after you got off the plane and recuperate.
That's
before
true.
you could get in the car.
That's true.
So every weekend,
Right.
for a couple years,
That's right.
you were making yourself sick going to try to
Well,
stay put college.
I was getting a little better as the years went.
I was going to say, you got to check your house. I think Billy's got it bugged. Or
Yeah, I mean, all these stories.
yeah, he knows a lot
Ron's got
about
some
you,
good
Ron.
stories.
I
We
did-
spent
He
some
might
time
be like
together.
your Cato Kalin. Is he
Yeah.
living out in a guest house?
No, I don't think so. No, we'll have a guest house.
Well, yeah.
Not yet.
So anyway, you get it co-ed, you get all that going. Where did enrollment go once you got it co-ed? And we're going to get into the sports teams.
Okay,
well, you were at 300 that you could accommodate, right?
Well, let's do this. We had about 650 beds on campus
Okay.
with about 300 women at the time.
Okay.
I knew we had to fill those rooms. We had to fill those beds, and we had to fill our classrooms. We were bringing in a freshman class. My first year of the freshman class was 117 new young girls.
117.
That was the first class.
Wow.
It just blew my mind.
What was total enrollment?
The total enrollment back then was about 1,500, 1,600 students.
Without commuters.
Right. And I told the board we needed at least 2,500 students, 2,200 students, or another 1,000 students, both with graduate, undergraduate, full-time, part-time.
Almost double it.
Almost double to maintain the type of revenue.
But you had 300 beds that weren't full.
That's
so
right. And
you could accommodate on campus about 600
That's right.
students.
That's
you had
right.
300.
That's
and
right.
So you're at 50% capacity.
That's right. And that's
when
no
you
way
got
to
there.
run a hotel.
That's right.
But I will tell you, the young women that lived on campus then, they loved it because they all had an extra room next to them that was empty, and they turned it into their study room, their reading room. Or sometimes their boyfriends from Fort Detrick or wherever would come over and stay overnight and stay in those rooms.
All right, let's keep it clean, Ron. So when did you get the 600 capacity? Were you able to do that?
Absolutely. In fact, we ran out of space on campus, and we were housing students in motels around, and we were looking at other facilities. We were housing there on 7th Street into the apartment complex there. So we got the undergraduate enrollment. The bottom line is we got the undergraduate enrollment to somewhere around 1,800 students in that range. And then we always had between 700, 800, 900 graduate students. So 2,500 or so students was the number that we reached. We were bringing in anywhere from 270 to 280, 300 freshmen a year. And that's not every year.
How fast did you make that transition?
Well, we brought in consultants to help us work the numbers, and they were telling me 5-6 years to get where I wanted to go. I told them I didn't have 5 or 6 years.
Right.
And I had 2. The board was anxious. So we worked hard, and we brought in a lot of new admissions people. I brought in an admissions woman from Ohio who I'd worked with. She was very good. She left her job from Ohio, came in and worked with us. She helped us in admissions. We had some new administrators that we hired. We just really were very aggressive in going out and recruiting students, and we were telling a very good story. The good story now is we have men and women. The good story was we have more recreation, and we have some new buildings going up and more technology. And so we had a more complete story that we could tell the students then. In about 4 years, we were off and running. And then we strategically used intercollegiate athletics to get attention.
But before that, the Hood College still has the same amount of beds on campus as when you came, right? You didn't build any new dormitories.
We did not. We housed the extra students that we had off campus.
And do they still do that?
Since then, they've closed one smallish resident hall and they built another large modern resident hall, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, and how many? Before we get into sports, how many buildings did you build when you were there, and what did you do with the actual campus?
Well, we completed the Hudson Science and Technology Center. It was being built, and that was a critical piece of developing that. We upgraded every resident hall. Our resident halls were built back in the 60s. They had the amenities that students needed, so we upgraded that, and we revitalized the library. We put in recreation intramurals programs that students really needed, upgraded the tennis courts, redid the tennis courts actually, swimming pool and so on. And of course, the dotting of the I, as they say, was the recreation athletics. I was calling it the Recreation and Athletic Center. They're just calling it the athletic center now. But we really needed that, not just for basketball or volleyball. We needed that for a place for students to congregate. We have political rallies in there. We have concerts in there. We have lectures in there. We have reunion weekends in there. So it was a multi-purpose facility, and that came later, but it was desperately needed.
But the multi-purpose facility, that's the Volpe building with the presidential suite.
No, it has seats up top with my name on it. Now, here's the story. I didn't know that was going in. And when that did go in, I later was told that this was Tom Dickman's idea, because prior to that, all the basketball games that they played, I would sit behind the bench and I'd get a little excited occasionally, would yell at the referees. And he was afraid I was going to get
you're getting like Robin Thicke.
Exactly. So he said, we need to put this guy somewhere out of sight and up high. So that's where they put me. But once it was built, I still sat behind the bench.
But you're just kind of glancing over that building. Tell us about that building. How big is it and what's in there?
Well,
it's the Ron Volpe building.
Well, that's the
There's
center.
a picture of it right there, Ron.
It's a beautiful facility.
That's quite a facility.
And first, let's give some credit to the people who built that thing. The Warner people, Warner Construction built it. It was Matt Warner and his team did a wonderful job on that. And we met with about 5 different people that wanted the contract. They're all good people, and I knew most of them. And I says, look, you're all our friends right now, but I don't want the 4 that does not get the contract to be mad at us. We want you all to be friends. So Matt got the job. And what I told the people is I had $10 million, not $10.2 million or $10.3 million, $10 million. And I had 15 months, not 16 or 17, 15. And I have some quality requirements here. So he laid it all out, and Matt and his team did a great job. And what's in there, of course, is the basketball arena, which is now Woodsboro Bank Arena. Before that, it was BB&T Arena, the basketball part. So we have a state-of-the-art fitness center in there, the Shimano Center, that our student athletes have all the amenities that they need. The locker rooms, up-to-date, state-of-the-art locker room, shower rooms, officials' rooms, a weightlifting and training room in there that people have it's state of the art there as well. And it's the size, it accommodates about 1,700 inside, which is all we needed. We built that with the idea that we wanted it large enough to accommodate an NCAA basketball tournament. Now, I made that comment over a decade ago, and people laughed when I said we want to accommodate, and it's happened. And I feel better now because one day I wanted to say we saw an NCAA game play in that facility.
So you bring in you get co-ed going. Now it's time to launch the sports baseball teams first, right?
Well, that's not fair. That came last, actually.
Oh, okay.
First was men's basketball.
So that was the first thing you wanted to launch was men's basketball.
Yeah. Well,
how'd you do that?
Well, I wanted to launch men's sports right away, and I had limitations. I had no money, very little. So people ask me, other presidents who visited said, why did you select these sports? Why did you select swimming, a men's swimming team? I said, well, because we already had a pool and swimming trunks are inexpensive. Yeah. And then you did tennis. We already had a tennis court and tennis balls are inexpensive. Basketball, well, getting a basketball team, we didn't have a place to play. That was the big problem. So that's when Tom Dickman entered.
And you didn't have a coach.
And we didn't have a coach. So the tennis and golf and those sports, we got a lot of good people from the area, high school coaches primarily, to come in and help us out. But we knew that the keynote program had to be a men's basketball team. And so Olivia White was my wonderful dean of students then. And she came to my office one day and said, President Volpe, we know that you played basketball before in college. We need you to go out and hire a men's basketball coach. I explained to her that I played many, many years ago, and I didn't know anybody around here. We need somebody. What about you, Olivia? Sports reports to you. And she said, I know who the best coach is around here. I said, you do? Who's that? And she said, a guy named Tom Dickman.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what college does he coach at? She said, he coaches at the high school next door here, Governor Thomas Johnson. I said, we're going to hire a high school coach here. She says, you got to talk to him. He's really good. I said, okay, let's get him and have him apply. And she says, well, he won't apply. We called him. He won't apply. I said, give me his number. We're going to tell him he has to apply. So I met with Tom, and he's a great family member, a great guy. We hit it off right away. And more than the X and O's about Tom Dickman, Tom's just a super fellow. They're great people. And of course, after Tom's great success in basketball, Chad came aboard, and Chad doing as well, if not
his son.
better than his son.
Well,
better than
wait a second. Let's say, hold on, time out. So you got to realize Coach Tom Dickman was 29 years at Governor Thomas Johnson.
An icon in high school.
He was
sports.
the all-time winningest public high school coach in the state of Maryland at the time. I don't know if it's still true or not.
Probably.
7 state titles. I believe in 29 years, they went to Cole Fieldhouse 18. Okay. More than half.
Yeah.
They went to Cole Fieldhouse to play in the Final Four.
Right.
He was wooed by at UMBC, wooed by his alma mater, Shepherd, wooed by Mount St. Mary's at times.
Hopkins.
Hopkins, John Hopkins, no. Happy here.
Right.
29 years. So tell us how that phone. First of all, how'd you get him to apply?
Okay.
Because I know the real story, and I'm not going to tell it.
Okay. Well,
but I want to hear your story.
Well, we went to lunch one day, and we started talking small talk, and then we came to the office, and he says, "Now let me see if I understand here, Dr. Volpe. You want me to be the coach of your basketball team, but you don't have a team." I says, "That's right." And then he said, "So you have no uniforms? No uniforms. And you're not in a league? No, we're not in a league. Do you have a schedule for next year? No, we don't have a schedule.
Nothing."
And then he said, "Do you even have any basketballs?" I said, "Oh yeah, over in Gambriel Gym, there's a lot of basketballs over there." And then he says, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I know Gambriel Gym, and those are women's basketballs. You have no men's basketballs." I said, "Well, I could buy those." And then he said, "Oh, by the way, where are you going to play with this team?" And I says, "Well, Tom, that's another thing I want to talk to you about." So we went through all of that, and then we talked about the salary, and he said, "Now, is that for one semester?" I said, "No, that's the whole year." And so he goes through all of these. He says, no assistant coaches, no trainers, no balls, no uniform. He says, "And you want me to take a salary cut and give up my job?" I said, "Well, Tom, yes." And he says, if I go home and tell my wife that she's going to divorce me, I says, "Listen, Tom, here's the deal. There's more to life than money. I mean, you're a good man. You're a good family man. You've been a great teacher, a coach, a super person. Look, you'll get paid in the next life. But right now,
tell Kay that.
But right now, we need you.
You got a wife too. We'll talk about your salary before we finish up.
We need you to come. And here was my hook. A lot of people don't realize this. When we were chatting, I come to understand that he went to high school at Wheeling Central High School, which was right down the road from Martins Ferry in Yorkville, where I played ball and was born. We were from the same neck of the woods called the Ohio Valley. And he had family that worked at the Wheeling Steel Company, where my dad worked.
Was he from the poor area too? Or
he was from a poor area. We were all poor back there, but we were two Valley boys. So I dropped it on him. I says, "Tom, look, if I can't get help from a fellow Valley band, I'm not going to get help anywhere." So we sealed the deal.
All right.
Good for you.
I think you sweetened that pot a little bit too.
Well, we sweetened it.
Yeah.
There was a rumor going around. In fact, there was a letter to the editor after we brought him that they were going to report me to the NCAA because I got $1 million and sent it to Tom to sign a contract. But Tom is still looking in the mail for the $1 million.
Yeah.
It's not there. So.
But you did get that pot sweetened enough that it made sense for him to walk away from one of the most powerful public high schools in the state of Maryland. That truly has never recovered since he's left.
Yeah,
and I'm not trying to negate anyone that has been there or
Right.
coached or
Well,
whatnot.
But as alumni of that great institution,
Right. Well, here's the
you're
thing.
the guy who ruined it.
Well, well, here's the thing. We can sweeten pots all we want. We can promise all the sorts of things we want. But people like Tom Dickman are very motivated. They like a challenge. He did tremendous work at the high school level. And how many individuals can walk into a high quality liberal arts college, start a program from square one, be given great support from the top down, start your own team, and within 2 years he had us in a tournament. He was recruiting people locally. I mean, he really is as much responsible for helping us turn that whole college around as anyone else. So that only happens once or twice in a lifetime. So I think he took it because of the challenge, because he's competitive, because he's motivated. And I was in near tears as an Ohio Valley guy asking him to come and join me.
So he got it going, and then he tells you, I'm going to retire.
Well, that's right. And I said, well, wait a minute. That wasn't part of the deal.
Yeah.
And who's going to replace you? We have to go out and find another Tom Dickman. And we decided there was one out there. It was at Wheeling College. It was Chad Dickman.
So is that where he was?
That's where he was. So we said, bring him on. And Chad has done a wonderful job. And here's another piece of the story that a lot of people don't realize. We had another Dickman at Hood, and that was Adam Dickman. Adam worked in our admissions office for a couple of years, and he was outstanding. And he's now in Philadelphia coaching. And I think we have room somewhere on the Hood campus for Adam to come back and coach something.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and then of course I was just there when you all won your pod. I guess you would call it the NCAA.
Yes.
Went from 64 to 32, and then you went.
So wait a minute. That was your NCAA tournament. That was your first one.
Yeah. That's right.
Just recent, right?
That's right.
So what happened? Tell us about that.
Well, the end result, after your season is over in this day and age, it means nothing if you don't obtain a bid to the NCAA tournament. Well, we won our conference. We've been to the tournament before, but we never hosted an NCAA tournament game on our floor. Big advantage. So we had such an outstanding record. We were ranked so high in the nation and so on. The NCAA invited us to host round 1 and round 2 of the NCAA tournament. Never, ever happened before at Hood. And when the first game we played, interestingly enough, was Vassar, another former women's college, and we beat them handily. The next round was against a very powerful team from California, Redlands University. Big, strong, fast. Not many people were giving our guys a chance, but they came out and they played their hearts out, and they won that game. So they won the first 2 rounds, and last week or so ago, they went to the 3rd round, and they just happened to be in the same bracket as the number 1 seed in the defending national champs, Trinity University in Connecticut. They went out there, and they lost by about 15. But the beauty
got it close a couple times.
Well, yeah, all of these fellows are coming back, so it's going to be a great year, a great year next
but
year.
Now you have everything, right?
There was a rumor that you did not sit in the nosebleed seats where you're supposed to, and you got a technical during that NCAA tournament. Is that true?
No, that's not true at all.
I saw you over there yelling
at the refs.
See, here's the thing. I've coached, I've played ball, and I was a referee. So occasionally the referees need some tutelage. They need a little So I just merely stand up occasionally and help them out. That's all I do. Okay. I would never yell at a referee.
But you have every men's sport there is right now except for football, right? I
pretty much so, yes.
You have lacrosse. You have all that.
What's the reason? I heard a bunch of stuff. What's the reason you didn't have a football team?
Well, first of all, it's terribly expensive.
Heck, Mount St. Mary's doesn't even have a football team.
Very expensive. And we don't have a facility for football.
Right.
We can't play on the field. So and there's just something that an intercollegiate football program at Hood just somehow doesn't fit who we are, doesn't fit the mission. Yeah. Basketball, yes. Hockey, lacrosse, but and by the way, let's not forget about the women's sports. They have been taken off really also. Good. We have some very good athletes in the women's side, and they draw a crowd, and we're just proud of all the student athletes.
Absolutely.
It's just we have about 400 or 500 students at Hood now that are participating in intercollegiate sports.
And what was the enrollment when you left? I mean, you went from
let's see, we had about 2,400 students in that range. Okay. So it's gone up. The
endowment is the coffers are full, and
the coffers are never full.
Well, I mean, is the endowment back up over 90?
Oh, yes. It went up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 million.
There
When
you
I
go.
left.
Coffers are full.
And then
So you took the endowment from the teens to over 200 million.
Well, it's something under it. It's something a little under that. And I don't say I took it. A lot of donors, alumni, benefactors, foundations, people that believed in the college,
the team
came forward and ended up. And the next president came in and she did a great job. And now the endowment is even higher, but it's never high enough when you're a small liberal arts college.
Well, you've done good. School's doing great. You're still coming back to the school. You still got a passion for Hood. You're retired now.
Absolutely.
I don't see you roaming around the gym talking to you. I see you at the Hood games.
That's right.
Yeah. So what kind of grade are we going to give him?
What tonight? Oh,
B plus.
A.
Plus.
But Ron, before I want to let you go, I told you a story. Now you've been gone 14 years,
From
right? No, not from Hood. I'm sorry. You were at Hood for 14 years.
Right. And I retired 10 years ago.
And you retired 10 years ago.
Right.
10 years ago, I remember I don't know what year it was, but right around that time, they published your salary. And I told you the story on the phone. So I'm at a meeting with some of the upper crest of Frederick people. And I think Phil was there. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure he was there. But they were discussing your salary, which I think was like $348, $358, something like that.
325.
Well, that's not. I'll show you the article. I don't think you're missing some stuff.
Everything you read isn't always.
If it's in the paper, it's got to be true, Ron.
That's right.
So it's over 3. Let's agree on that, right?
Right.
Pretty healthy.
Yes.
Pretty substantial.
Yes.
And some business people were making comments about it. And the only comment I made was, y'all got off cheap. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, should have paid the man $3 million because the school would be closed.
Well,
if they didn't hire him and figure out all the different components from the endowment fund to making it co-ed to putting sports in that people follow. So, I mean, I know you got a building over there with your name on the top of it and
Presidential suite.
But I think, still when I talk to people, you were the catalyst. Sure, there were lots and lots of team members, team players on the board, faculty, alumni, but I mean, you really not only, I won't say saved the school, made the school thrive in many areas. So you should be congratulated. You should have your name on a building. Oh, you do.
Yeah.
Well,
so
let me just respond. Thank you.
Well, you don't have to respond.
Well, I want to though, because there's another little story within that story, and that is that I don't believe that I alone did anything down at that school. I had a lot of support from a lot of people, many Frederick leaders themselves, alumni, trustees, donors, board of associates, students, parents, community leaders. So it was really, really a team effort. I was just out in front pushing and yelling and shoving, and other people were just following me, and that was just wonderful. And that's what led to what Hood is today. Now, in terms of salary, I had a very, very good salary, and I had a very sweet deal in Ohio before I came to Hood.
What are you saying? 300 ain't enough, Ron?
Well, no. What I'm saying is,
didn't start there.
I didn't come to Hood to take this position because of the salary.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact, the thing about higher education, which is kind of strange, is every year the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is like the Wall Street Journal of education, publishes all the president's salaries. Well, one year they had an article in there on Bill Brody, who was the president of Johns Hopkins, and his salary was like $1.5 million a year. I was in an alumni event in Baltimore, and a couple of alums came up to me and said, "Geez, Ron, this guy's making $1.5 million. Isn't that outrageous?" I said, "Well, I really don't think so. Do you know the presidency at Johns Hopkins is maybe the toughest presidency in America? That guy has a medical school there. He has all that neighborhood issues. He has 25,000 students. I'm not sure he's been getting paid enough." And these alums looked at me. And so, the point I'm making, my salary was $300,000, but I didn't start there. I brought 35 years of administrative experience to Hood.
Ron, you're worth every penny. Enjoy
but what
it.
I'm saying, but I never negotiated that salary. Hey. I never negotiated a contract. They brought a contract.
They got you cheap, Ron, and you went too low.
You should ask for incentive bonuses.
Well, my payoff was not in the paycheck, but my payoff was working with those students and faculty, taking a school that was nearly going down to bring some life into it and see what it has developed into today. That was a life-changing experience for me, and I'll be forever grateful for that. I appreciated the compensation that I received, but I had nothing to do with it, really. The executive committee would evaluate me every year. They put it down and said, there it is, and there it was. Now, what folks won't know is I came my first
last story, Ron, and we're wrapping up.
My salary. I have one thing to ask.
Okay, my salary was $150,000 when I came. I froze my salary for the second year because I says we don't have the money.
Can't afford it.
We can't afford it. I tried to do it a third year, and the board said no. They says we need to keep growing this salary every year because one day you're going to be gone, and we're going to have money in this presidential salary. So I wasn't offended by the story that they wrote. It was true, much of it, not all of it. There are some things that
358.
But
go ahead, Ron. Go ahead, Billy. What's your question?
Well, I heard he negotiated one thing.
What's that?
Lifetime basketball tickets in that building with his.
There you go. And with that, that'll be the last word. Ron Volpe, thank you for joining us on the last of the Good Ole Boys with Blaine and Billy and sharing your story with us. And we'll see you at the gym. We'll see you at the Hood basketball games as you're still very active in our community.
Good. Well, thanks. Great having me. Thanks for having me here. And basketball season's only 8 months away. We'll start off with our Rotary Club, a Hood College tournament in November, as we did this past November. And we're going on there because now we're shooting for national championship next year.
There you go.
Well,
and
what
with
about
that,
Ohio State? I mean, Penn State's going to take them this year, right?
And with that, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Sam Rosenbloom, who's running for Board of Education on the last of the Good Ole Boys.
Sponsored by Intense Barbecue, family-owned barbecue food truck and catering company cooking in small batches to ensure that the food is the freshest it can be. Intense Barbecue can cater your events, and they do any kind of food. It doesn't have to be barbecue. Find them at sebbq.com and satisfy your meat tooth.
All right, welcome to the last of the Good Ole Boys with Blaine and Billy. Joining us now is Sam Rosenbloom, who's running for the Board of Education. Sam, how you doing?
Wonderful.
So, Colt Black reached out to me and said, we got to talk to you. You're running for the Board of Education. I'm not up to speed with everybody that's running for every office. For those that are listening, if you want to come on the last of the Good Ole Boys, you can. Generally, what we talk about, Sam, is we want to know about you, your story. So tell us a little bit about Sam Rosenbloom. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? How'd you end up in Frederick and all that good stuff?
Well, I was raised in Maryland. My children are raised in Maryland. My grandchildren are raised in Maryland. I was employed in Maryland. I retired in Maryland. I graduated from the University of Maryland twice.
Wow.
So I'm definitely a Marylander.
You're a Maryland guy.
Definitely.
Isn't it Maryland Day or something like today or yesterday?
Yeah. And by the way, I've pledged to donate any salary that I have
To Ron Volpe.
to charity, to give back. It really is as a form of giving back to Maryland.
Yes, that's wonderful.
That's a
What do
great
they
thing
pay
to do.
school board now?
Pardon me?
What do they pay school board? 10, 12,
I think
15?
it's like 14.
Is it really?
Yeah.
So where did you grow up in Maryland?
I grew up in Lanham, Maryland,
Okay.
near a place called New Carrollton.
Okay.
And it was not too far from the University of Maryland. And my high school I went to, I understand, was the first air-conditioned high school
Oh, wow.
in Maryland. It was called Parkdale. It was in between College
I
Park,
know Parkdale was.
College Park and Riverdale.
Mhm.
And I have a bachelor's degree in biophysics.
Wow.
And I worked. My first job was working as a biophysicist. Was working at University of Maryland Research Center.
Okay.
And after that, the person I was working for encouraged me to be an engineer. And he took me to the bookstore where you buy the books for your different classes. And he said, here, this is electrical engineering. This is this. And nuclear engineering seemed like it was kind of easy to me. So that's what I did. It turned out it wasn't so easy. But later I got a degree in nuclear engineering. I went to work for the Navy. And partially that history is a little bit why I want to run for school board, because I got to see sort of these big, fantastic engineering programs where people were really making things. I lived through a period where my own industry was leading the world, and now it's trailing the world by the end of my career.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really crazy. I mean, I remember when I was in school, I remember seeing someone who had a pair of sneakers that wasn't made in the United States. They're like Puma sneaker. Now it's like, can you buy anything that's
right, made here?
Yeah, or even a shirt? You know, is there? I don't believe there's a single shirt made in the United States that they grow the cotton, they spool it up, they send it to a place that makes fabric, and then they sew it and they make a shirt. Right. So, not a single thing. And we invented sewing machines.
Yeah.
So is this your first entry into running for public office?
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, did you follow politics before? Or, I mean, what's your hobbies? I mean,
well, actually, my hobby is restoring antique sewing machines.
Okay.
But as far as politics goes, yeah, if you want one from the 1870s, I got a few.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, and my stuff works. You know, it's not just sitting around getting rusty. So I was originally going to some of these school board meetings, and it was sort of just exercising my First Amendment rights and listening to people, talk about their various different issues. And it just seemed to me as though the education is such a sacred thing, to educate your children. And people are spending so much time on things which are almost like a distraction. So much, time on things which affect 1% of the people, transgender things and things like that. Although it's really important, I don't know if that's part of the core of education, unless it maybe, unless it involves maybe some safety issues or things like that. And then, of course, you can go off on a tangent on that. There was this whole issue of whether or not you have to notify parents. And then there was a Supreme Court case. I think it was with someone in California, went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that, no, that wasn't right. You had to notify the parents. But then Maryland is pushing back on that, just like you have like marijuana laws. There's federal laws, but we're pushing back. Yeah. We don't agree with it, So
I mean, did you just start following school board? I mean, why the school board? Did you start following what was going on in the school board issues? Is that kind of what spurred you to not only run for office, but specifically the school board? I
was just looking at them with a very critical eye, and I had this feeling that it was they were just more politically savvy than it was actually people that were qualified to create the policies and so forth, to educate children. And I realized that I had all this really interesting, technical experience. I've seen industries that I worked last year, I did consulting at a facility out in Ohio, and the one facility produced one product, and there were 200 different buildings that came together to do uranium enrichment and everything. Wow, that's really crazy when you see all this stuff. And I'm just wondering whether or not we can have a curriculum. This was the crux of what I was after, a curriculum that could introduce students to technology and manufacturing. We do have a technology program, like how to build houses and to give kids a head start to become an electrician or a plumber, in the trades, and all that is super important. That shows a lot of insight. But people like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and those people, one of the things that they had, and even Michael Dell, one of the things in common that they all have is they never finished college.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Their personalities. I mean, the person that just made the biggest single charitable donation, $6.25 billion, right, for children's savings accounts and things. His entrepreneurial spirit was established by the time he was in high school.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anyone else running for school board or currently on the school board that has a background in science and engineering, or, I'm not even going to ask about the nuclear part.
Not that I know of, and certainly no one has really pushed this sort of agenda. To me, when I was in high school in the 70s, I remember I had a physics class, and the person had a computer terminal. It was just a dumb terminal, and it was connected to University of Maryland Computer. And there were some kids that were sort of involved in it, whatever, but that teacher understood that, the computer age is right around the corner. Right. I mean, that was before a single laptop. I'd never even seen it was way before there was even such a thing as a personal computer or anything, but he understood that was the next generation, was the computer science generation. But I believe that the next generation is really about American innovation.
Absolutely.
older people are kind of stuck in the mud, because if you went to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, they would say, of course, we're not going to manufacture anything in the United States. Look at what things cost, and we have to pay Social Security, and over here in the Philippines, we only pay 25% of what you pay there. But a young person might say, well, I don't know. With all the AI and the technology and we see things today which seemed like it was literally science fiction.
Yeah. So where can people go to find out more? I think your website was up there, and they can get a hold of you, talk to you there, get in touch with you.
samforschoolboard.com.
Sam, the science guy.
Sam, the science guy. Now's the time for innovation.
Absolutely.
Well, Sam, I want to thank you for joining us and tell us a little bit about who Sam is and about some of the reasons why you chose to run for office and why you specifically chose to run for school board.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And that's going to wrap up this episode of The Last of the Good Ole Boys. I'm your host, Blaine Young, and Billy Shreve. And everyone have a wonderful evening, and we will talk to you real soon.
Have a good week.
That's this week's conversation on The Last of the Good Ole Boys. Join the discussion, drop your questions and comments, and be part of the conversation. Catch us live Wednesdays at 6 p.m. on the Everything Frederick Live YouTube channel, right here from Studio 401.